inflation, the economy. So many issues are before us, bread and butter issues. And so I want to know from you, what is most important to you? The legal troubles of the aforementioned, or the economy, inflation, Ukraine, the funding of it, public schools, healthcare. Many people are still getting COVID and other illnesses, and they need assistance. The number one driver of bankruptcies in the United States is still our healthcare costs. What about police reform? Tyree Nichols in Memphis just this past year showed us that that is still an issue, and we're dealing with that. We're looking at it in Memphis right now, and on and on. What about our voting rights? What about our voting rights? What about our voting rights? What about affirmative action? What about affirmative action? What about student loans and student debt? There's so much that people are thinking about, that the corporate media, uh, we're caught up in this. And it's important to look at the legal issues facing these candidates and the people who are around them. I'm not going to say that that's unimportant, but what about how you're eating from day to day? What about the meals that are being taken off your table, out of your mouths? What about the opportunities that are being denied you? What kind of America do you want? So call us at 866-594-HOPE, 866-594-4673, and let's talk about it. Throughout the week, I want you to reach out to Reverend Jack. Six, excuse me, 773 freedom, 773 freedom. But call us today at 866-594-HOPE. What is the issue? What are the issues that you feel are most important in 2024? Call us at 866-594-HOPE and reach out to us on the Reverend Jesse Jackson Senior page and the Santita Jackson, the Santita Jackson Show YouTube channel. Want to hear from you. Hey, Dave. Hey, Carol. Sending you all so much love. Sending Yvonne much love. I understand she's driving back to New York today. So call us, 866. Let's talk about the issues. What is before us? What do you really want to see these candidates tackle and talk about in the 2024 election cycle? Back with more of Keep Hope Alive with Reverend Jesse Jackson in just a few minutes. Okay, so we'll bring up Kevin now. And we'll keep them for the first hour. But let me send you, Jeremy. I need to send you Melody's number.
That's 1-866-594-4673.
Go with your gut. Your dog's immune system is based in the gut. A diet lacking in nutrients can cause itching, scratching, and a weak immune system. However, there is a solution. DINOVITE, Dinovite. It took a grand total of 2 weeks. The dog stopped itching, the hair stopped falling out. Try Dinovite for free.
Let's send you Miss Serena's number now.
Learn more at dinovite.com/radio. Happier, healthier with every bite. Over 1 million pets help.
Summertime is almost here. Don't be caught with it. Good morning.
Good morning, Mr. Lampy. This is Keep Up Alive.
Yes, sir.
Please offer Santita.
Thank you.
Get America's best beef, chicken, seafood, and pork, all delivered straight to your door. Right now, get $25 off your first order with the code FAMILY25. Plus, subscribe today and get free bacon for a year. Go to goodranchers.com and use the code FAMILY25. That's
Oh boy. It'll let you know that they want you to buy a new phone. Okay, who do I have up? I have Reverend Dr. Yuri. We have Dwight McKee. And we have Kitty and Kevin. Hey, how you doing?
Good morning.
Good to have you all on this morning. I'm going to keep you all on for the first hour. Then I will. Dwight, I know you are. You and Mrs. Jackson have something planned this afternoon. That's wonderful. She's excited.
Yeah.
She is excited, so that is a great thing. Okay. All right, Kitty and Kevin, how you doing, my friends?
Good morning. Good morning.
Kitty and Kevin, I need to talk to you this week if you have any time.
Always have time for you.
Always.
Yeah, good morning. Melvin.
I have to see Blake
Yes.
in
This is
person
Keep Up
one of these
Alive.
days too, because he always starts
It's
to
Cole for
say
Santita.
something
Connect you with the
interesting
man.
that I have 47
Thank
more
you.
questions about.
Who? Bryce Green?
Right,
Oh,
right.
okay. No, I'll connect you to him because he's fantastic. I got
Yeah.
him from Fairness and Accuracy in Reporting. He's a graduate student down in Indiana. He's getting his PhD.
No, Sandy. She said me.
Oh, Dwight
Yes,
McKee?
you
Oh,
know
please. Oh, well, I'm sorry, Dwight. I didn't mean to hurt your feelings.
who I
You did?
already know. I just haven't seen in person in a while.
Okay, now, Dwight, where are you so that you cannot be found?
No, it's
I'm just out in Kitty circle. Kitty is in that major inside high end circle. I'm just a little colored up on the top side. I don't run that kind of work.
Kitty is also out here with these people. You see Kitty and Kevin everywhere, all the time at the same time. And I tell you what, whenever we need something, you call Kitty and Kevin, and they get on it, and they raise all kinds of cane and make things happen. We love it.
And they are major players.
They are.
I'm a little major players. I'm a little minor guy on the sidelines. They are major players.
Not true.
and he'll frighten you. Girl, I wish I could control my board from home for all the trouble he gets me in. I said, what is he gonna say today that's going to, Lord have mercy, makes I'm trying to, would you let him know, Kitty and Kevin, I'm trying to stay on the air? What? Like, do you understand what that's about? No, he doesn't care. Okay, beautiful people, we're gonna come on up.
Anytime you want to get together, Kitty, I'm available.
I'll connect you, but I will not give you. I'll connect you all by text. Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
but I think I've got your number from back in Rhinefest. But connect from when we did Rhinefest stuff. But connect them. I have the right info.
Stand by.
It keeps setting my soul
Wow, the great Walter Hawkins. Wow, one of our dearest friends down through the years, and indeed one of the icons in all of music. One of the great psalmists and songwriters of the past century and on into eternity. He and his brother Edwin Hawkins helped to reshape gospel music and popularize it all over the world in a particular way, giving you the best of that which was traditional and that which was contemporary. We love you, Walter Hawkins.
Hold on, please.
And of course, one of Dwight McKee's best friends, but one of my family's best friends as well. And we're so excited to hear his voice this morning. Everybody, let's talk about election 2024. What are the issues that are going to be driving you to the polls or might be keeping you from the polls? There are many stories, and there's a lot of data that supports that African Americans and Latinos are a little disaffected with the Democratic Party right now. Why and how can that be turned around? What about more and more Americans who are open to a third party option? What will that mean? What will that mean for Cornel West, for an RFK Jr., for Marianne Williamson, for people who have not insubstantial followings within the Democratic Party and outside of it? So we got a lot to talk about today. What about the economy? What about inflation? What about student loan debt? What about voting rights? What about police reform? What about what are health care? What are the issues that you think are most important? We're hearing about this soap opera, and it's really not insignificant because the legal challenges facing President Trump, former President Trump, are important. And I mean, they really do go to the heart of who we are as Americans and, the strength of the presidency. That's important. But what's happening with Hunter Biden is important too, as you watch that play out, and how that might, have even how it might create some exposure for the president. There's just a lot going on. A lot going on. 866-594-HOPE. 866-594-4673. Want to hear from you. We've got a tremendous panel with us today. Of course, there's a seat at this table, and we miss you, so we need you there. Melody Serna, Executive Director of the American Indian Center of Chicago, brilliant voice that we need to hear more from, not just in Chicago, but all around the country. Reverend Dr. Todd Yeary, National Leadership Team from Rainbow Push, and the Senior Pastor of the Douglas Memorial Community Church in Baltimore, iconic church. Dwight McKee, brilliant social scientist from here in Chicago, the Dean of the Mafa Redemption Project here in Chicago. Kitty Kurth and Kevin Lampe, two of the best crisis managers in all of American politics, indeed, world politics. That's what they do, Kurth Lampe worldwide. And they get people elected here and all around the world. So let me start with you, Kitty. What are the big issues to you? I mean, we're looking at, everyone is talking about President Trump, and we're waiting to see what's going to happen in Atlanta. And I'm not, making light of it. But what are the big issues that are facing Americans? What, as you see it, what has most Americans concerned?
I don't know if it has most Americans concerned, but it should. To me, the big issue is the future of democracy and who controls the narrative. And the right wing is increasingly trying to change the history books and trying to control what children are taught in school and trying to take facts out of school and to create a different narrative. And I don't say this lightly, but this is what they tried to do in Germany in the 1930s. They tried to control the books, burn the books. They tried to change the history. And if we aren't willing to confront our history and talk about our history and to use facts, then our nation can't stand and democracy won't hold. If they start trying to whitewash slavery, if they start trying to change the facts, nothing will matter because our democracy will fail.
866-594-HOPE. I mean, indeed, the polls are showing that.
There's 13 people in the United States who have gotten 11,000 books banned.
Wow. 11,000 books banned. Whew. Oh, Dwight McKee, your thoughts?
Wow, Kitty, that you dropped a bomb on that one. I think climate.
School boards. This is why every election is as important, especially school board elections, because the people on the right who are trying to stop democracy are starting at the bottom levels of democracy. Sorry, Dwight, go ahead.
Oh, I think it's a very important issue, but I would say on my side, the most important issue this would be climate control. Is the changes in the climate. Is I think that's going to affect every facet of life around the world, whether it's food, whether it's inflation, whether it's energy, whether it's health, public health. I think this climate is really on the brink of being out of control. And the UN spoke up yesterday, said we were going from climate warming to just hot, Yep. And with the change in these weather patterns, which are only going to get worse, I think it's going to create famine. I think it's going to create civil war. I think it's going to create water shortages. I think it has begun to create flooding. I think that Al Gore was right when he said, and I'm sorry he didn't become the president, where he said if we didn't move on global warming 20, 30 years ago, By now it's going to be out of control, and I think it's right on the brink of being out of control.
Somebody knew something. He won an Oscar for the film. I mean, yes, Kitty.
Say something.
Of course.
Dwight, 1,000% right. I first started working with Al Gore in 1989 on climate change issues. We knew then, when we were talking then, that it was probably too late, but he was willing to put his reputation on the line and keep talking about it. If people had listened to him back in 1989, we might have been able to change the course of things. I don't mean to be a naysayer, but we might be too late now, but that doesn't mean we shouldn't try. And all of the things that, all of the incremental changes that you can make in society to help stop climate change are also going to make communities healthier. Having people eat food that's produced in healthier ways, using energy that's clean and efficient, it's not just going to help the whole world, it's going to help communities right here. Like in Chicago, Naomi Davis with Flax and Green, trying to make neighborhoods more sustainable and make people's everyday, day-to-day life healthier and have better food. And Dwight is absolutely right. We still maybe have time to change it, but if we don't take it seriously and get the whole world to work together, it doesn't matter. We've seen that, you know, what happens in Canada. When fires burn in Canada, we breathe the smoke.
Well, Melody Serna, the indigenous community have been warning us about this forever. What do you see?
Good morning.
Good morning. Wonderful hearing your voice.
Yeah. I think these are all things that are now finally coming to a head, and it's the fruition of, you know, Native people telling, you know, everyone who would listen, this is coming, this is coming, this is coming, this is, you know, this is where we are. I mean, especially with the climate, right? If we don't respect Mother Earth, if we're not giving her what she needs, if we're not being reciprocal in our relationship, bad things will happen. And, you know, here we are. I mean, she was mentioning, you know, the wildfires in Canada, and they're affecting First Nations so much that people from around the world were flying in from other Indigenous communities to help put out those fires. And then how it affects, you know, the way we breathe. I mean, another really big one, I mean, it's not a popular topic, but we're going to talk about pipelines, talk about national parks, talk about the drilling and mining that are happening, you know, on reservations. You know, like, there are so many things that are happening in climate that are affecting Native folks that I think we're screaming from the top of our lungs saying, stop, stop, stop it, because we're still trying to live, right? We're trying to get to those next 7 generations, and we're really trying to be there. You know, she brought up something, you know, really poignant earlier about books and education. You know, Illinois just passed a law approving mandatory Native American curriculum starting in 2024. And, you know, I sit on that committee now with ISB and the Illinois State Board of Ed and curriculum development now for what that's going to look like for our children, because you can't keep erasing it. And I think, you know, I'm hoping it's going to be some president somewhere that's going to put out the apology. There's been no apology. And when you don't acknowledge what has happened, how can you teach the history and make it relevant for our young people to want to learn? And we're not apologizing. We're not telling the truth, because the truth, you know, was put out by this colonialistic, you know, white settlers. And, you know, but that goes across the board, right? That goes for natives, that goes for African American relatives, that goes for a lot of minorities that have come in.
Hold on, Chris.
And we're not teaching the history. And if we plan to be the superpower again, we have to be able to come together and really, you know, our values are on display right now. I will tell you, you know, I have a lot of friends, you know, on both sides of the water, and they're like, what's going on over there? Your elections are nuts. But to be perfectly fair, they're starting to become that way a little bit of everywhere. And America sets the precedent for where we go. And so just because, Native Americans aren't as big of a voting bloc, they help turn elections in places like Wisconsin and Arizona. Those key states, those swing states, we turned those. Those were Native votes that did that. And when we don't stick together for the common good of what we really want to see is the future of our country and the future of our nation, this isn't about, I always say it's not about politics, but it's always about politics, right? But where we go, what that looks like, in that reciprocity, in a lot of things, right? In laws, in policies, we're changing, what that looked like on the Supreme Court. It took one president to change the Supreme Court. And look where we are. We have take away affirmative action. You're taking away women's rights. There are so many things that are happening. I think these elections are so important. And so Native people have really started to enter this, civic engagement of we're running for local offices. We want to change where, I don't care if you're a dog catcher and you're a Native, you start there and you get to be the water, commissioner next, So we're in these places now where local government it's more important now more than ever. So Congress is great, Senate's great, the president's great. These local offices, these local, races are so important to the actual policies because that's where they start. That is really where they start. And I think that's where we really need to be, is really focus on all these things, fundamentally, who we are as people. Who are we as people, as human beings? Where are we and where are we going to go?
Civic engagement, registering to vote, getting people out to vote. Reverend Dr. Erie.
Good morning, Santita, and to my colleagues. I think for me, the priority first is the process. If the process of engaging civically is already hampered by disruption and interference, then it's hard to get to the address and the redress of the agenda items. And so I think I want to start with the civic engagement piece, making sure that we are fully engaged and ready to respond to some of the adjustments, many of them malicious adjustments to the ability to exercise the franchise, to go to the ballot box. It's from there that I think the issues become not a one-off. We shouldn't, I know we're prioritizing, but we've got to have a holistic approach because as we've heard already, all of these things are interrelated. They're not in isolation. And so as we're considering how we move and how we proceed, we should start. You and I've had this conversation many times. We get distracted by the big shiny thing at the top, who's going to be the president. But we forget who's going to be president of the school board, which we've already heard. Because that's where your bookman policies are coming from. We have to remember that this Supreme Court, their big policy leaning is towards states' rights, which now means local and state elections have a great deal of influence in terms of how we live our daily lives. If we're talking about criminal justice reform, if we're talking about voter access, particularly in federal elections, if we're talking about economic opportunity, if we're talking about the expansion of Medicaid so that folks can get health care, that means then that we have to have a full-on 50-state strategy starting from the bottom up so that as we bubble up, we will get to the presidency and who's sitting in the Senate and who's sitting in the House, but ultimately who's sitting in the state House, who's sitting in the state Senate, who's going to be the executive that's going to appoint judges when there are vacancies and the judges who get elected to run state law. 97% of what affects us happens under state law, not federal law. And so I think we have to be really focused, as my sister has just said, that we've got to be really focused on what is the objective and then build out the strategy of implementation so that when it's time to move, when it's time to vote. Right now we're in registration and confirmation phase. Register if you've never registered, confirm your registration just in case you may have been purged so that when it's time to execute, we know we have everything in line. If we know transportation is going to be an issue, let's have that strategy conversation now so we can get folks to the polls. Let's not wait until the early voting windows. If you have an early voting window, let's not wait for that to start. For me right now, it is how are we going to navigate the process? Because if we don't handle the process, the agenda will not matter.
Everybody, you know what, Kevin, I've got a couple of minutes before we go to break. And you can, of course, speak more on the other side. But Kevin Lampe, because we are in crisis mode, but so are Americans. Kevin Lampe.
Democracy is on the ballot. Participation is key. Motivation is key. We've got to be a part. We have to vote. We have to be registered. We have to show up because there is a growing movement in this country just that is dedicated to taking away rights that we have fought so hard for so many generations. And we need to put a stop to that. And we need to be a united voice. And we need to get people to show up. And I got to tell you, I've never been, you know, I've been a progressive Democrat and liberal all my time, but I think there's nobody on the Republican side that is going to, all the Republicans are dedicated to destroying the democracy in this country to get their gain.
Let's talk about it, everybody. Chris, we're going to get you on the other side. Call us at 866-594-HOPE, 866-594-4673. We've heard democracy is on the ballot. We've heard about climate change. I mean, it has been the hottest July in history since they started measuring and looking at weather. We've never had a July this hot, not just in this country, but all around the world. You have to remember that the heat that lands on our shores, it goes out into the ocean. And so we have storms, the likes of which we've never seen before. Would someone please go back to Vermont and Maine and tell us what's going on with the coastline? Because every time the astronauts go up, they say, oh my gosh, what are we doing to Mother Earth? Back with more of Keep Up Alive in just a few minutes.
When I would do wrong, when I'm down low, he is me.
Your opinion counts. 1-866-594-HOPE. That's 1-866-594-46.
Okay, Kitty.
Yes, ma'am.
I'm about to send you. Well, I'll connect you and you and Dwight jointly by text.
Excellent. Thank you.
But you all can talk. We're on what is it called? We're on StreamYard. So we're on several platforms all at once, and people love hearing the crosstalk. Oh yeah. Takes it behind the curtain.
You know, I was out in on one of the native communities in Nebraska last year, and unfortunately, so many things hit the First Nation peoples first, and they were talking about how much hotter and how much colder it's gotten out there, and how much it has affected their livelihood and everything in their community. And unfortunately, once again, the people who are the most vulnerable are getting hurt the worst by climate change in every country, and especially in ours.
Do you think it's hitting us now? Do you think we understand that now? I mean, because
I think we're getting there.
You think we're getting there?
I think we're starting to get there. I think it's now opening the eyes. I think just internationally, right? Climate change as a whole, I think internationally it's starting to get there. And Indigenous people have been screaming it from the top of their lungs, you know, this is what we do. This is how we take care of her. This is how we take care of, you know, our water. Because our water is life. It truly is like the bedrock of where we come from. And if we're not taking care of things like the water and the soil and what goes into it, and we're not taking care of the air, we're not taking care of ourselves. I mean, the life expectancy for folks has dropped by almost 10 years.
It's stay right there. Hold on. I want you to make that point, and then I'm going to bring in at least one caller.
4673.
Hey, everybody. Welcome back to Keep Hope Alive with Reverend Jesse Jackson. What are the issues that will be driving the 2024 campaign? Some people would say inflation. Some people are saying the economy, right? Some people are saying police reform, voting rights. But this panel today, a little surprising. They said, wait a minute, climate change. Of course, as living in your own space becomes unbearable, it's going to shift migrational patterns. People are going to have to go where they can get relief. How is that going to change the world? How will that fuel conflict? What about democracy? What about just the very nature of our government and how we govern ourselves? What about that? Many Americans are scared to death of what another Trump presidency could mean as he seeks to move more power into the executive branch, specifically into the Oval Office. So what do you think about that? Call us at 866-594-HOPE, 866-594-4673. Before I get back to you, Melody, because everyone really wants to talk about the climate. It's very interesting because this has been the hottest July in the history of the earth. Chris from Oak Park. Chris, what's on your mind today? I'm so glad that you called in.
Good morning.
Hopefully everybody's well. Good, great topic. And good morning, Reverend Jackson.
Good morning.
What I wanted to say is the people, they have the average kitchen table topic, how they're going to feed their family, able to pay their bills. But I think the elephant in the room is a Marshall Plan for Black people, because based on the wealth gap increasing, and the report and study done by the Brookings Institute, by 2053, Black net worth will be close to zero. So that will present a permanent underclass. So we need these politicians who are going to, they want your vote to better your life, and not just get on policies like the passing the tax bill for the wealthiest 1% and the corporations, but they have to come to Joe Q taxpayer, and we need better education in this country to compete with other countries. We need a livable wage. We need better health care, and also the corporate greed and the making money. Now we're killing the what do you call it? We're getting all these storms that are abnormal because of the great pollution we're doing to the atmosphere, and that's based on corporate greed and not worrying about the average person. And we had data years ago the planet was warming, and we've done nothing to it and put our head in the sand because of the big lobbyists that pay the politicians. And if they don't pass legislation for them, no money for their coffers. But we have very, very big problems that we need to address for the common folk. And also the former president, I do not worry about him because his problems were self-done, and he was a former president, so they're treating him with some difference. That's why he's not locked up just yet. With all the absorbent crime, the average person, I'm sure, would not have a bond, but this person is raising money for his legal fees from a percentage of the population. And I think based on all the legal parole, he will get his upcoming, and it was based self-done. And I just wish Barack Obama took more of an aggressive policy measure towards bettering, the plight of the Blacks in America, because this president and the GOP has went along whatever he's done, even breaking the law.
So what would you have wanted President Obama to do? Because remember, when that question was given to him, he said, look, I'm the president of all America. what say you? Although many Black people, well, but not in big numbers because Black leadership was told to stand down and be quiet. Uh, we have specific problems and we need specific solutions. So what would you have wanted him to have done, Chris?
He may have had bad advice in his corner. I can only opine on that. But I think the wealth gap
The education piece could have maybe done with an executive order, and also reparations should have been on the table, and that should have been, solved already.
Chris has given us another view. Dwight, why don't you? What do you think about what Chris is saying? I mean, you're not too far from where he is. You're on the west side of Chicago.
Well, I think that the wealth gap, there is a major wealth gap, but I think the perception and the definition of wealth is going to change. Wealth won't be perceived as the accumulation of assets and things in 10 years. Wealth will be a clean glass of water, I mean, as this reality changes, our whole self-concept and our whole self-perception is going to have to change in relationship to it. And so where the natives, for example, are perceived to be poor today, their lifestyle and their history gives them a real advantage in the future because they understand how to negotiate the land and they understand how to negotiate extremes and climates coming out of their history of not having, an industrial base, but being able to negotiate based on ingenuity and based on being able to manipulate the land and the water in such a way is to make life possible. We don't have that advantage. That's coming out of urban America are at the mercy of the food store or Walmart, of the gas stations. I mean, we're at the mercy of this industrial base. And if they don't come and feed us and clothe us, we're going to be homeless and starving.
Kitty.
So the perception of wealth is going to change, I think, in the next 10 years.
I think you're right. I mean, and Kitty, think about it. The power grids all over the country are threatened by this heat. They're telling us to raise the air. Don't have your air conditioner at 65. Thank you, Jeremy, for turning it up today. Keep it at 73. Keep it at 77. And when I keep hearing about the power grids being threatened, I said, wait a minute. We take a lot for granted when we get up in the morning and we flick a switch and everything comes on. Most people in the world, Kitty, don't live that way. Rolling blackouts, if they have, have powered electricity, that is not a given in most places all around the world, Kitty.
That is so true, Santita. Years ago, Kevin Lampy and I were doing democracy training in Uganda, and one of our local guides said, "Oh, tell me about where you live in Chicago." And I said, "Oh, we live downtown. We live on the 25th floor." And she looked at me and she said, "But what do you do when the power goes out?" And I said, I don't know. The power doesn't go out. But in Uganda and in India and many places around the world, South Africa, the power goes out, sometimes scheduled, sometimes not scheduled. People still have to walk miles and miles with jerry cans on their heads to get water. We are so lucky here, but we take it for granted. And if we don't build our grid in a sustainable way, it's not that we're going to lose power 10 years from now. We're going to lose power 10 minutes from now.
Yeah. This summer, Kitty. This summer.
In the winter when the grid went down.
Yeah.
It's overcrowding. If you remember, President Carter, as an example, put solar panels on the White House back in the 70s. And the first thing that Ronald Reagan did when he became president was take the solar panels off the White House as a thing saying, "Oh, we don't need sustainable energy. We should use fossil fuels." Well, guess what? We can't. We can't. And if people make small changes in their own lives, that's a start. But we need to make big policy changes and big changes we can't live the way we've been living. It's not going to work.
Reverend Dr. Uri, you're in Baltimore. How would this conversation square with people in Baltimore?
Well, the conversation about environment is particularly important. The city of Baltimore has actually advanced mitigation to deal with corporate pollution. And the interesting piece is because environmental law, really being the province of the federal government, precludes municipalities from being more assertive in addressing what's happening with the environment in their own local area. And so there's this rub. There's a willingness at some levels, but there's a kind of deafness at the top when it comes to dealing with these issues, because at the end of the day, it's all about who's going to make the profit. We just saw that with the Supreme Court allowing the advancement of the building out of this pipeline, much to the glee and the delight of Senator Joe Manchin.
Mm-hmm.
He's trying to figure out what he's going to do. And so the politics of expendability, that there's a certain amount of human loss of life that's acceptable in the profit-making venture called capitalism, is playing itself out in terms of how policies are advanced. And to Big Brother Dwight's point, as the resources become less and less, the willingness to sacrifice more and more the human dignity and actually the human person becomes more of an issue. If we have migration that has a concentration in some areas as opposed to others, but you haven't changed the power dynamic and the shift that's necessary to make sure that you don't have an imbalance of interest, you could actually end up with this slippery slope going further down, where these regressive policies that are very much indifferent to the thriving of all being a priority. We don't really care about whether or not the rising tide lifts all boats. If the rising tide floods your house, but it pads my bottom line, I'm cool with it. That's the kind of informed, focused advancement of this next election cycle, local, state, and federal, that has to be advanced. Otherwise, we're going to find ourselves in probably less than a decade, at the rate this court is taking us back in time, with a most precarious situation that's going to be harmful to all of us, not just some of us.
Melody, how will you be campaigning in election 2024? Who will you be targeting? What will you be saying?
We have something called Democracy is Indigenous, and it's a civic engagement program that was kind of put out to really address those issues, right? It's addressing, voter registration. It's addressing the suppression of Native American voters. If you live on a reservation and you don't necessarily have a home that's on a residential street, off of a reservation, you can't register to vote because, your mobile home or home that's built on a dirt road that's not really considered a road, you can't register to vote. So suppressing Native votes, but all of these votes and the way that they're coming, the national political landscape, right? The get out the vote strategies, the voter registration, our engagement strategies with our local governments, right? Mobilizing social media is really huge for us right now. Medicaid expansion, the impacts on Native community and what that's going to look like, public policy impacts on Native communities. So we're really looking at what does that really look like for us as Native people, but everybody is just hitting the nail on the head, right? Some of those things are, who has influence off reservation hunting, and what does that look like in resources? What does that look like for resources when it comes to mental health? What does that look like for water? Or, on the San Carlos Reservation, copper mining. There's so many things that I think that we're, there's the land back movement. Land back movement is super huge, I think, for us as well, because it's protecting those rights in those lands. It's allowing Native people who are a political, class, right? We're not just a race, we're a political class, as done by Congress. And so we're saying, look, we have these sovereignty rights on how we should be able to govern our people. And I don't think the Native American voice has been heard for a really long time, and now, we're in this precipice where people we're changing votes in these states, and it affects our economy. It affects the way that our children are educated. It affects businesses. Indian gaming. We just had this conversation. I'm actually in Michigan right now, home of good old Julie Dye, and pushing for Native rights, and in the Democratic Party, but also just what does that look like for civic engagement? There are people like Judith LeBlanc with Native Alliance organizations who are just out there really pushing what does this look like for this new election. NUIFC and Janine Comino is out on the West Coast in Seattle, and she runs Democracy is Indigenous. CNA, Center for Native American Youth, have been running Democracy is Indigenous for a really long time. And the reason why we do this, and NARF, Native American Rights Foundation, there's so many organizations, right, that are raising money and raising the funds, because we're in this place. We were just talking about this weekend with National Indian Gaming Commission, is where are gaming monies going and how are they affecting our communities? The bottom line is where in economics can we affect our communities and their livelihoods? Because when you don't have a roof over your head, you don't have clothing, you don't have water, you don't have ample food sovereignty and food resources, how can we really address anything else? How can we address climate? How do we address economics? How do we address affirmative action when you don't have the basics? And I think that's what we're really hitting in these elections, is we need to be at these local levels really hitting the key points of what we need as human beings, and how does that affect our livelihood moving forward, for all people. And Indigenous people are trying to take care of the world, right? We're trying to take care of Turtle Island, and that's Indigenous people everywhere. And so elections everywhere, to be perfectly fair, are important. So here in America, most pertinently, the places like New Zealand, Australia, Africa, Uganda, Rwanda, South Africa, Brazil, right? These elections are huge to Indigenous people, and what they're really trying to get the world to look at is, if we come back to our humanistic values and we stop looking at things from a capitalistic lens, because that is what's driving all of these politics. It's money. Money is driving politics. And if we go back to just those values, and then we don't have to worry about some of these bigger things. But now we're here, and we're in a different place in, just in society as a whole, right? Social media is huge. What does that grab look like on our people? What are those algorithms? Why are there no regulations? Why are the narratives run by the people, behind the curtain? And how are those affecting our elections?
Sure.
For smaller minority groups like Native Americans, we don't have the capacities of the Mark Zuckerberg. Where's the ethics in that, right?
Sure.
In those regulations of the information that even goes out to people. And so I think it's huge. Elections are a really, really big topic, because there are so many subcategories that we can talk about, not just for Indigenous people, but for all people of color.
But you know what, Melody? You know what? I think what we have to do is grow up in our politics and understand that what's good for the least of these is good for all of us. What's good for the most vulnerable populations, it lifts everybody. When you end slavery, you free everyone. When you give women the right to vote, you strengthen the right to vote for everyone. When you save Indigenous people, yeah, absolutely. I've got about 10 seconds. Yes.
Well, for me, I think it's the information campaign, and who controls the information.
Absolutely.
The dissemination of that information.
That's why propaganda is watching how we're being propagandized is so important. And more Americans don't trust corporate media. And yes, I do have friends in corporate media, and I have been in it. I get it. But we have to, you have to be worthy of trust. So you have to tell the truth. You have to stop censoring people. We have to get all of these stories out and information flow and give everybody access to information. In a revolution, the first mechanism that's controlled is communications. It's shut down. Back with more of Keep Hope Alive with Reverend Jesse Jackson. What is your issue for the 2024 election? Call us at 866-594-HOPE. And please join us at Rainbow Push at rainbowpush.org. We need your support. Help push as push helps you. Back in just a minute.
come away somehow.
Coming up.
Yes.
I just gotta get some coffee. Everybody, Kitty,
Yeah.
you say I sent you and Dwight a text, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
I'll be right back. You all can talk, but remember you're on Facebook. I've got to get some coffee.
I'm gonna, one of the things as I listen to this conversation, I realize more and more, and I have over the last 2 years, is there is a movement to stop the agenda of the people that has never been stronger. Trump has empowered the MAGA movement and the people that support the opportunity to oppress other people, and they've been laser focused on that. We have to stop our infighting on the left. We need to build our coalition, and this is a binary choice. And any kind of third-party movement on a national level is just going to hurt our movement on a national level.
Yes, I couldn't agree more. I think we're in that place where we kind of reverted ourselves back. But again, I think that pushes the who controls the information and the dissemination of that information. And I think when we look at elections, we are in this place, and she says we need to grow up in politics. I think we have to grow up in the technology that we're in. We have to grow up to the resources that we have. And what does that look like for folks that don't have those accesses to those resources? And who's really listening to that information? So this propagandized, MAGA movement was basically done over social media. It was done over social media, the thing that connected our families together, the intention of connecting our friends together, turned into a place where it became politics. It was political, and it became a weapon of the misuse of information on who gets to say what and to whom. And if you have more money for those ads in those places, what does that information look like? And so what it did is it gave power to those that are misinformed on how to push these movements. Some of this propaganda that's out is just outright outrageous. Things from, Pizzagate and child sex rings to, where we are and natives don't matter, or, black folks are, their votes they don't matter, or whatever. And we're in this place where if we're not conscious, I think, about where we are with the information, I think we're doing ourselves a disservice. And so to push the civic engagement movement for us to move forward, I think we really have to attack places like Twitter and, social media and Facebook and Google. Google is a huge dissemination of information. And if we're not putting out proper information, then how do we even get people to exercise their rights when they feel that they're no longer being heard because their voice didn't have enough money to raise those ads to get their stuff to the top of that click?
That's exactly why I started out the discussion with talking about saving democracy and controlling history and the dialogue, because this is exactly what's happening. Everything is designed to funnel the misinformation, and what a lot of people don't realize is the tropes that the misinformation tropes that the MAGA movement is using is not just from them. It actually, a lot of those tropes were created in Putin's misinformation factory and spread on the internet and then pushed through the Breitbart network and the other white supremacist networks, so that all around the globe, these movements that are promoting the rise of authoritarianism, they're all using the same message in each of their own country. And unfortunately,
Stand by.
misinformation is working.
Stand by, everybody. I'm going to give you all closing thoughts on the other side of the break. Hey, everybody. Keep Hope Alive with Reverend Jesse Jackson. What is your election issue in 2024? We're talking about climate change today. We're talking about civic engagement. Everyone here on this panel is saying you have got to get involved in this election. If you don't think elections matter, look at what the Supreme Court has done. One president has turned the tide of the Supreme Court. One, just one. And Mitch McConnell, who refused to interview Merrick Garland. Wow. Oh, my goodness. So we want you to call us today. Let us know what you believe the issue that will be driving people and you to the polls. Is it voting rights? Is it climate change? We've had the hottest July that we've had in the history of Julys since they've been measuring these temperatures for the past 100.5 years. We've never had a July this hot. That's driving migration all over the world, which drives how we relate to each other. It drives social unrest. It's driving a lot. It's driving storms that are becoming much more vicious, much more torrid. Really, it's driving the erosion of our shores. It's driving a lot. And you have the power to turn the tide by getting registered to vote. And thank you, Kitty and Kevin, for telling us, remember, you got to check to make sure that you're still on the voter rolls. Thank you, Reverend Dr. Geary. Closing thoughts on the Keep Hope Alive show. Let's continue to talk about 2024. What is your issue? Back in just a minute.
Live with Reverend Jesse Jackson. For more information on upcoming shows and guests, please visit our website at www.keephopealiveradio.com.
Okay, my lovely panel, I'm going to give you all closing thoughts. Your thoughts will be the closing thoughts as we come into this new segment, and I'm going to let everyone go, but I thank you for being with us today. Okay, so stand by, please. Kitty, I did tell you, okay, I did say as I left out of here that you and Dwight can be in touch. So you can, he can frighten you with some of his thoughts. Go ahead, Dwight. So you can go, oh, honey, because he almost gets me put off there on a regular. I'm like, oh, Lord. My eyes, Kitty, rolled to the back of my head like, what did he just say? What? But you know what? He has been eerily correct in his predictions. He said Trump was never going to leave office. He said Mar-a-Lago would be another White House. He said he'd set up a parallel government. He said we'd be talking about him for 4 more years and that he'd be back. And guess what? All that's been true.
It was right.
He didn't want it to be. He said, this is not what I want. But he's a social scientist. And so that changes, takes the emotion out of it. It's like, this is just what I see. You just don't get mad with me. I didn't make it hotter. Stand by.
That's 1-866-594-4673. And now, the Reverend Jesse Jackson.
Hey, everybody. Hey. What's going on? That's right. Thank you, Marvin Gaye. I'm Santita Jackson. It's Keep Hope Alive with Reverend Jesse Jackson. We're talking about election 2024. What are the issues that will be driving you to the polls? What do you want to see these candidates talk about? We've been talking about the challenges facing former President Trump, the challenges facing Hunter Biden. Will the president himself have any exposure? That's one set of issues. Important. But how we live from day to day, the fact that we've had the hottest July in history, that's big too. Voting rights, that's big too. Civic engagement, that's big too. Because we see from the ground up how, Kitty, you said, 13 people have gotten 11,000 books banned? I'm getting closing thoughts from this panel. Whoa, talk to us.
Just Keep Hope Alive. Please, for Santita.
That's my fact.
Oh.
And I just got back to you. But it is essentially 13 people that have been behind this whole book banning movement across the United States.
Okay, well, your closing thoughts. I mean, how does that, okay, they're organizing clearly from the ground up.
They're organizing from the ground up. So what we were talking about is people need to get involved in local elections. People need to be involved. If you like freedom, that's the freedom to not vote. But if you don't vote, you will lose your freedom. And if you like your freedom, you need to get involved in your community at the local level, at the national level. We can't take our rights for granted or some
Brilliant.
John Nichols.
Melody Serna,
Good
I've
morning,
got about
John
a minute
Nichols.
for
This
you.
is Keep
Your
Up
closing
Alive.
thought?
Please hold presented.
Yeah,
Yes,
I think
sir.
I'm just
More engaged and excited about where we're going in this election because of civic engagement, right? I think it's, you know, it's the fundamentals. You know, we were talking on the break, you know, one of the really big things that concerns me the most is the dissemination of information. And so I think that's where we focus. I think we can't really get to the meat and potatoes of politics till we really talk about who controls that information. And I think as an Indigenous person, you know, I will always fight for our people and our inherent rights and our land and climate change, but also social justice. And what does that look for us moving forward? So I'm excited for this new cycle.
It is a moment. It is a moment. Kevin Lampy,
Good
your
morning,
thought.
Attorney Mathis. This is Keep Up Alive.
That
Please
is
hold
something that the
presented.
MAGA movement has proven to us.
Thank
That
you.
when you're looking at a ballot, whether it's for President of the United States, whether it's for the Water Reclamation District, you know, in Cook County, whether it's your township board, whether it's your village board, anybody that is voting and is voting for a Republican is voting for the MAGA movement. And we have to stop the MAGA movement.
That is, there you go, Reverend Dr. Todd Yeary, before you go preach today.
If you can keep your head when all around you are losing heads, you've got to remain focused and clear-eyed on what the objective is. It's easy to get sidetracked and frustrated because the realities are so persistent. But this is a window of opportunity where we can push back against the notion that the people are disengaged. If we're ready to vote and we're registered to vote and we do vote, we will change and shift this regressive politics that has overcome the country.
Dwight McKee, your closing thoughts?
Well, I think also we could analyze this environment issue, excuse me, is going to be the planet itself. The planet will impose its will without our cooperation. Earth is going to be what it needs to be. We can either be part of it or be victims of it. But ultimately, we'll make the adjustment because the Earth is going to be in charge. As we are forced to industrialize and rethink capitalism, I was very serious till I think we have so much to learn from the indigenous people because they have enough things to protect their natural resources. And they will be kind of the indigenous, the only people left. The first people here would be the only people left. Very interesting that the Temptations made a song and they talked about a ball of confusion, forward, confusion. But they said only safe place to live at some point. There'll be a Indian reservation. I think that's prophecy.
Wow. Was that Norman Whitfield who wrote that? Oh my goodness. There you go. Everybody, ball of confusion. Hey, let's talk about the vote. Let's talk about how you're going to be voting, the issues that are going to be driving you to the polls in 2024. Going to be talking with Attorney Janice Mathis, National Council of Negro Women, John Nichols from The Nation magazine, Attorney Darrell Jones, Transformative Justice Coalition. Cannot wait to hear your thoughts. Back with more of Keep Hope Alive in just a few minutes.
You want to call your mom? You want to call your mom?
Yeah. Okay, Dwight and Reverend Dr. Yeary, Kitty and Kevin and Melody, we're going to let you go, but thank you so much for being with us today.
Good morning, Miss Jackson. This is Jeremy at the radio station. Is Reverend joining us today? Do you know?
Nutritional deficiencies produce issues like itching, scratching, and a weak immune system. Dynavite has been shown to...
Dwight, are you staying with us?
Take it from one of their customers.
I have two dogs, Sam and Bailey.
Dwight?
Okay.
Retriever.
Okay.
Dwight?
His paws were
Yeah.
Are you staying with us?
I'm just listening. I won't be standing.
No, yes, you will. We'll keep your mic open. So thank you.
After he started Dynavite, I started seeing great improvement. Today, 99%
Are you
of
okay?
his issues are non-existent.
Oh, okay. You're walking kind of funny.
Oh, this is down.
Oh, okay. Okay.
That's TINOVITE.
All right, John Nichols, how are you, my dear brother and friend?
I am so well, my dear sister and friend. It's good to be with you, and it is good to be with whoever else is with us this morning. I think at least one good friend is.
You know Attorney Janice Mathis and
Of
Attorney
course.
Daryl Jones. These are all, and Dwight McKee, who you finally met.
And who I cherish. Dwight inserted ball of confusion into the discussion there, which I think is and it was Norman Whitfield, but we also have to remember Barrett Strong.
Oh my gosh,
who wrote
excuse
so
me.
many of the lyrics. Well, they both wrote it together, and I'll tell you, we just lost Barrett Strong recently. And
Yes, you're
he was
right.
A truly, truly brilliant wordsmith.
Dwight, ow. I think we got this morning. You said, wait. What about Barrett Strong?
Well,
oh boy.
What I think Norman Whitfield and Barrett Strong would both be very pleased if their song was brought up in the context it was brought up.
And the band played on.
Okay, before you all break out and become Hall and Oates.
I don't think that'll happen.
Oh no. People get inspired. So there we go.
Yeah, it is true. It is true. Ball and Confusion's a great song. In fact, boy, Whitfield and Strong were at their very, they were kind of at the peak during that period. They wrote song after song after song. They were knocking out a song every few weeks that would become a classic. And I think they are, I think, a good deal of credit, but never enough.
I think you're absolutely right. Absolutely right.
They were also very political. They had a deep political understanding, and I think, we talk a lot about the Beatles, we talk a lot about Dylan and other folks. If you want to talk about who was like hit songs in the late '60s that were charting, people were hearing it, and that had very deep political messages. I think that Whitfield and Strong were, they were right up there with anybody else. Maybe even above some others.
Well, I feel an essay coming on. I mean, look, I'd even work with you on that because when I think of Roberta Flack and Donny Hathaway and Curtis Mayfield and the rich music from that period, Buffy St. Marie, Joan Baez. I mean, these are people who crossed over into the popular culture.
They totally
Melanie,
did. And they brought power. Yeah, and they brought powerful messages. It was, and it was especially, there was something amazing going on in soul, right? In the soul and rhythm and blues scene, where the songs that were crossing over were deep and addressing the Vietnam War.
Well, who helped to end that?
Racism.
Clive Davis. Clive Davis did a study of Stax music very quickly and found that they were mining the richest messages, and it was decided that they needed to be put out of business. And that's what happened. It happened, and Al Bell almost lost his life trying to protect that company and those treasures. Stand by. Coming up, hey, wow, what is this? Well, play them. Walter Hawkins. Let's hear a little bit of that, Jeremy.
And it keeps setting my soul on fire.
Hey, everybody. July 30th, 2023. I'm Santita Jackson. It's a joy to be with you today on Keep Hope Alive with Reverend Jesse Jackson. We need your support at Rainbow Push. Please go to rainbowpush.org or call us at 773-FREEDOM throughout the week, Monday through Saturday. And please help push as we help you. Attorney Janice Mathis, former vice president of Rainbow Push, now the executive director of the National Council of Negro Women. Attorney Daryl Jones, chairman of the Transformative Justice Coalition. Dwight McKee decided to hang around so he can hang out with his new buddy, John Nichols, from The Nation magazine, their national correspondent, indeed, New York Times bestselling author, along with Senator Bernie Sanders. What is the name of the book? It's Okay. What?
Okay to be angry about that.
Come on. Well, John Nichols, before you go worship this morning, I mean, we see the Quinnipiac poll that says that more and more Americans are open to the third option in American politics. You see this powerful voice in Cornel West. People are very, very intrigued and excited by his candidacy. People are intrigued and excited by RFK's candidacy as well, and Marianne Williamson's. And though, I mean, not just the personalities, but what they're speaking to. But people are also excited by Donald Trump, even though most Americans say we've got Trump and Biden fatigue. We want somebody else, but it looks like they're going to be the nominees, and wow. But what are the issues? What are the issues? We were talking about climate change, civic engagement, the fear for really the existence of the democracy, the republic itself. What do you think? What are the issues? What is the issue that's driving 2024?
Well, I think that in the last hour, Dwight McKee summed it up pretty well when he said, in some sense, the issues that define it can be summed up as a ball of confusion, right? We have so many things coming at us because we live in a new age, and this new age is defined by incredibly rapid communication, by new technologies which we don't fully understand and don't fully understand how to control, but also by the old problems. And so, in a sense, everything we've always been concerned about is coming to a head, right? And we like to think that when deep problems, deep concerns come to a head, that they'll quickly be addressed, that somehow everybody will realize that there's a right way to do it. But history tells us that that's not always the case. Often when you get into an intense moment, you have very strong forces pulling in different directions, trying to suggest which way you should go. And I would suggest that if we kind of carve through all of this, push aside all the chat GPT and all the AI and all the Twitter or X or whatever you want to call it, and all of everything that's going on, we come down to this core concept that we are still as a people struggling to define the fullness of human rights. And I say that not casually, because I think that when we talk about the fullness of human rights, we bring in economic and social and racial justice. We bring in healthcare for all, education for all. We also bring in a concept that we will care for the planet, right? Because we all live on this planet. And when the planet is destroyed, when it is undermined, those who are most vulnerable lose their rights first. And then finally, even on these fundamental issues of peace, which I think it's notable that when you talk about these alternative candidacies, right, folks who are challenging within the Democratic Party or outside the Democratic Party, again and again, they come back to questions of war and peace and to this incredibly overblown military-industrial complex we have. And again, that's something we link to human rights, to this core concept that if we have a full understanding of our rights as human beings, what we have to recognize is that we have a right to live in a world of peace, in a world where, we are cared for, one for the other, my brother, my sister. And I know that sounds perhaps a little more spiritual than politics gets these days, or very often than it gets. But I would suggest to you that people, citizens, bring to elections the wholeness of themselves and their concerns, their fears, their frustrations. And at this time, I think coming out of COVID, coming out of everything that we've had to deal with over the last few years, people are very frustrated and unsettled and looking for some sort of vision to take them forward. And I would suggest to you that as a close on this thought, that the prospect of a race between Joe Biden and Donald Trump. I mean, for me, I know how I would choose in that race, right? I mean, I've always been very critical of Donald Trump, and I have a good regard for much of what Joe Biden has done. But the prospect of such a race, I think, is frustrating to people, and it is sort of unsettling because here we are in a moment where there's so much that needs to be done, and we seem to be repeating the old contests again. And so 2024, in my mind, is really a test. And it is a test, I think, of whether
one party, in this case, I think it's the Democratic Party, whether it can get its act together sufficiently, listen to these dissident voices, listen to these alternative voices, listen to these challenging voices, and come forward with a program that is frankly much more radical than what they have offered us up to this point. I think the people are ready for it. I think the people are ready for economic and social and racial justice, for peace, and for saving the planet. And I think if that's the message, it could have great resonance. If it is not, if it is just a petty conflict between, individuals, personalities, even parties, I think this frustration that we have as a society that's just brought out in the Quinnipiac poll, I think we'll continue to see evidence of it.
Because there is no social promotion in the spirit world. You can play around in school if you want to. But God does not let you move to the next level until you have learned these lessons, and then you could move forward. And I think that's why we're repeating things, John. Because now people more and more, more and more, the young people are far more progressive than our generation and those who are just ahead of us and those who are just behind us, quite frankly. They're like, look, we got to look at capitalism. They are saying we've got to look at climate change. We've got to look at how we relate to each other and how we relate to other countries. They are more forward thinking. And I think I'm just wondering how that will play out in 2024. Will it play out in voter apathy or more voter engagement?
And I'm hopeful in that regard.
Okay.
More impatience, and that's healthy, right? We teach patience as a virtue, and it often is. Certainly it is in dealing with individuals and people that we know in our day-to-day life. But in politics, patience isn't always a virtue. Sometimes you need pressure. You need a push to do more. And I think that young people are very impatient. And they should be. Why wouldn't you be? Coming of age in a time when you are told the planet is burning, there's an immediate need to answer all the questions as regards climate change, and yet government doesn't do it. And maybe Biden, I think, has done much better than the Republicans, but he hasn't done enough. And again, when we talk about basic premises that you learn, as a very young child, right? To do unto others as you would have them do unto you. And we see a society where that's just not happening, right? Where we have immense wealth in combination with immense poverty, where we have, human rights abuses that are clearly defined and clearly evident at every turn, and that can be addressed, and yet we don't address them. And so you ask yourself, where does this all come back to? What's the root of this thing? And again, I think that's why Senator Sanders and I wrote the book. It is to suggest that too many of our debates get wrapped up in questions of personalities, and they lose sight of these structural realities that define so much of our lives. And what are structural realities? Well, structural racism. It's an issue that has to be addressed. It's a fundamental. And also structural economics. The fact that we have a system that too easily is exploited by the very wealthy and powerful, and is too hard for the great mass of people to get even basic needs met. When you start to understand that, and you start to see that clearly, and I think young people do see that clearly, they begin to look for alternatives, right? That's, I think, why Senator Sanders did so well as a presidential candidate in 2016 and 2020.
Even as he was blocked. Even as he was blocked by the party. Let's put it right there, because he had the big momentum. He was the only one pulling out the big crowds. He was thwarted, as Reverend Jackson was. And it's like you're shooting yourself in the foot, or maybe you're not, because maybe this duopoly, maybe they're all working for the same people. But I do know the most popular elected official in the United States today is Bernie Sanders. But you know what? Black women it has been said that we have been saving democracy. John Nichols and Attorney Daryl Jones and Dwight McKee. So I want to speak to the executive director, former vice president of Rainbow Push, but do we ever stop working for Reverend Jackson and Attorney Janice Mathis? No. But of course, she's known him all of her life because her father was really like another father to my own. Attorney Janice Mathis, what's driving? What are people talking? What are they telling you they want you, because you represent really our oldest, most esteemed Black women's organization in the United States, if not the world.
Well, good morning, Santita, and to John, and to all of your guests. It's a pleasure. This is such an intriguing topic, and I don't think I will have a cogent answer, but let me try to put a couple of things into perspective. Every time I spend time with Reverend Jackson and the Rainbow Push Coalition, as I did at your wonderful convention, I come away refreshed and invigorated to fight on just a little longer. The issues, if you're talking about the issues, we tend to think of them, Black folk, white folk, everybody in the United States is sort of culturally isolated. We tend to think of these issues as national issues. But I would want to challenge the audience to think about these issues as truly global issues. I made a pitch while I was in Chicago for something called the Red Card Campaign to end all forms of violence and discrimination against women and girls. In the United States, that gets packaged as abortion rights, reproductive freedom. But that's such a pinhole in terms of what gender equality means across the globe. Also, women don't get treated fairly in any nation. Mm-hmm. It has different aspects it takes on. You know, is it female genital mutilation? Is it child brides? Is it, we just observed Black women's unequal pay day this past week. That's what it looks like in the United States. But I'm calling on your audience, and I can't think of anybody better to call on, to look at these issues through a global perspective. Climate can be confined to the United States. As a matter of fact, as long as wealthy nations are free to use as much energy that they want, and developing nations, whether you're talking about the global South or feel deprived, or that they have to make sacrifices for their development in order to save the climate. We can't solve climate only in the United States. The same is true even of things like inflation that we tend to think of as an American issue. Oh, Joe Biden spent too much money and now we've got inflation. There is global inflation because of COVID. And so I guess what I'm saying is we've got to all become more global in our perspective. And if we do that, I think it will inform. And I agree with John. There is an impatience with politics as usual. There is a feeling that politics, especially in the United States, is too corrupt and too partisan and too slow to bring about meaningful change. And that's another reason why we've got to look at these issues not through the keyhole of U.S. partisanship, but really look at our place in the world and what it is that the United States can and should bring to resolving some of these issues. Well, what does it mean to be part of NATO, for example? And how long would the United States and other nations be patient about trying to end the slaughter in the Ukraine?
Well, you know, I mean, my question for you is, I mean, how does that square as we're watching the world, as we're watching BRICS rise, as we're watching the so-called global South really become predominant? Indeed, the rest of this century is supposed to be the century of Asia, but the next century is supposed to be the century, really the moment for a rising Africa. Indeed, that is something that Putin has said. He said the next center of power will be Africa. That's where all the resources are. And I mean, and as you pointed out, women, most places in the world need a man to get a bank account, Attorney Janice Mathis. we can't inherit property. I mean, it might sound a little crazy to Americans, but you know, we just what is it? Equal pay day for Black women. It takes us almost a year, 3/4 of a year to make what a white man makes. I mean, this is where we are. And Indigenous women it's almost a year. It takes them 11 and a half months.
Be found inside the borders of the United States. I'm just calling on people to be more inclusive. Even immigration. Immigration is not just a problem on the Rio Grande. Immigration is a problem all across Europe. There is a right-wing political movement that's sweeping across the globe. And if we're not aware that it may make us make decisions about our own political destiny that are too narrow and too constrained to be effective.
You know, John, I know you're on your way to your church service, your worship service. I've got about 2 minutes, literally. How do you want to close this out? Before we go, we're going to pivot to you. Of course, you're going to open up the next segment, my dear, beloved Darrell Jones, but the 2 minutes belong to you, John.
Well, I sure appreciate it. And I know you're going to hear wiser words from others in a few minutes, but let me just offer to you this Sunday morning, a time when so many of us gather in all sorts of different settings to reflect. It's, at its best, it's a time when we can reflect. That this show is doing something very important. And it is asking some of these tougher questions. You know, it's easy to fall into simple partisanship. To say, I like this party, I don't like that party. I like this ideology, I don't like that ideology. I like this person, I don't like that person. What we need is a deeper commitment to address fundamental issues, because we've been talking a little bit about impatience in this last few minutes, and I think Janet did such a good job of discussing it there. What we need to understand is impatience is not irrational at this point. It may be irrational in some circumstances, but it's not irrational at this point. We have a very small window in which to save the planet, and we also have a very small window in which to save lives. There are people all over this country and all around this world who don't have a lot of time, right? Because they need health care, they need food, they need, you know, all of the other basics of life. And our politics ought to be about that. And it ought to be comfortable discussing that on a regular basis. And I think it's a blessing that this show exists. I think it's appropriate that it be on Sunday morning, because this is a time when we need to be reminded. We need to be reminded of what we have a right and a responsibility to demand from our politics.
The word has to be flesh. That's what we're told. And God made it so. Sending you so much love. John, how can we get your book? I got 30 seconds.
Book is all over. I was down here in Washington State. I spent 1 hour to talk. And a friend of mine went to a bookstore to get a copy. And the woman said, well, we had a dozen of them last week, and we've only got one left.
All right.
And he bought that last one. So hopefully, people still get the word. And Reverend or Senator
10 seconds.
and I were talking. Senator and I were just talking, and we are very determined to carry this message forward. Make sure people hear it.
Got to get you.
One of the best places where it can be heard.
Got to get you on my show to talk about it. John, sending you so much love today.
Blessings to you.
Oh, sending you so much love. Thank you so much.
Love to you.
And my love to your congregation this morning.
Thank you so much, and love to everybody on the show. You're doing wonderful work here today, and I say goodbye, especially to Dwight, even though he's being quiet.
No, he's not going to be quiet. I'm just going to sit and observe. He's going to take everything. He does what my mother does. They take everything apart. They pluck all the feathers off the chicken.
They listen, and then they close it off with great wisdom.
Right. Look, our pastor yesterday, who spoke beautifully, he said, now after he wrapped up his message, he said, now I'm going to ask Dr. Jackson, Mrs. Jackson, what she really thought of my message. I said, oh, you know she'll tell you.
Oh, that's good.
Sending you so much love. Thank you so much for being with us this morning.
Love and solidarity.
God bless you. Darrell?
Hey, good morning, St. Peter.
Good morning. It's wonderful hearing your voice today.
Same here. Absolutely same here. And what, I was listening in on the show, all the wisdom that's coming through.
Boy, it's coming through. Well, can you believe we're at 2024 already? It's like, what? When did this happen? It's like the years are just like going by. Running.
You know what they say.
I feel like they're already in mid-form for election season as well.
Well, but Janice, I hear you, as you get older, the years start zipping by.
Right.
They do. You're like, whoa, what happened here? What happened? But thank
Isn't that the
God.
old saying that as we age, the years go by quickly and the days go by slowly?
Oh boy, grind on. Stand by. Or drone on. No pun.
You're listening to Keep Hope Alive with Reverend Jesse Jackson. Call 1-866-594-HOPE. That's 1-866-594-4673.
Hey everybody, keep hope alive. Ooh, with Reverend Jesse Jackson. I'm Santita Jackson. It's a joy to be with you today. Attorney Janice Mathis, Executive Director, National Council of Negro Women. Dwight McKee, the Dean of the MAFA Redemption Project here in Chicago, founding member of Operation PUSH, founding board member, and Attorney Darrell Jones, chair of the Transformative Justice Coalition. You've been hearing a lot. It's very interesting, Attorney Jones. Everybody's been going back to the existence of the republic, the existence of democracy, the existence of the planet. I mean, people are looking at big issues in 2024, just big issues, civic engagement. What's going on? What do you see?
Well, Santita, it's really interesting because we're just coming off our 5-day tour, 15 cities throughout Florida, where we did a rolling protest regarding some of the positions of Governor DeSantis. And so it gave us an opportunity to really interact with varied people throughout the state of Florida. And one of the things that became very clear is that the old Tip O'Neill statement that all politics is local is very real. People are beginning to are feeling those tangible things that are happening in their communities when we're talking about banned books, and they're offended by the books that are being banned. When we're talking about reproductive rights, they're offended that the government is having a role to play in determining whether or not a woman can take care of her body and make decisions regarding their bodily autonomy. When we're talking about environmental justice, the student loan debt, diversity, equity, and inclusion, all these issues are becoming like local issues. They're seeing them in their community. They're watching it play out. So, what we see happening, what I see happening is that, people are really offended by what's happening on the ground in their community. Particularly, and we focus on the young millennials and the Gen Zs. You're talking about a group that is the most diverse, the most accepting group that has existed in our country's history. And so when you start, taking these actions against these groups politically, they're beginning to respond, and that's what we're seeing happen. And I think that's what's going to continue to happen as we move through this election season. That you're going to see the young voters truly come alive. They're alive now, but they're going to become even more active, and they're going to be pushing on these particular issues because that's really what we're hearing everywhere we go is about these basic issues of community and acceptance and being able to work together and come together and getting it out of politics. So that's what we're seeing, Santita. That's what I anticipate to see as this election season, carries on as well. And not to mention about the fight to be certain that people actually have access to being able to vote.
Well, it's very, very interesting. On my way into the studio this morning, I heard an interview, Dwight McKee and Attorney Jones and Attorney Mathis with Maxwell Frost. The young man from Central Florida, the first generation Zer to be in Congress, 26 years of age. And he said, I wasn't going to run, no money, didn't think I was going to win. But finally, he was adopted. He says, I talked to my biological mother, who he has known all of his life. And as I talked to her and I looked at what drove her to yield me to adoption. I'm not going to say give him up because she didn't do that, but she sought to give him a better life because when she had him, she was in a most vulnerable state. He said, so I just started to run because I wanted to serve. Whether I was going to win or lose, that didn't matter to me anymore. I just wanted to serve, and look at what happened. Dwight, because it seems that people are looking, their definition of this generation, these young people, they have another definition of winning and losing. and of what's important. I mean, as we look at in this post-COVID world, people don't want to go back to work the way they did before. Everything is very different. How do you think that's impacting the 2024 election?
Very interesting. We were a Governor Wallace generation, and he stood in front of those doors and farmers and stood in front of the school doors and said we could never get in. He would never intervene. He would never allow us to really know each other, that this race should be over here and that race should be over there. But this generation is a Mr. Rogers generation. They are a generation that was raised to believe that we were all one neighborhood, and we have responsibilities for our neighbor. And it's a tremendous difference in how they perceive reality and how they even perceive themselves. Mr. Rogers was a gentle man, a loving man, a caring man, and you really redefine masculinity for this generation. And so they have a total different disposition on how life should work and what life is. They don't see themselves as James Bond and super that we did. They see themselves as everybody lived on Sesame Street, and they grew up understanding that Cookie Monster had a place, and Easy, a rider had a place. Everybody had a place.
And the Cookie Monster, and if you lived in a garbage can, you were still my neighbor. I mean, you're right.
Good. And so they really do have a different mindset, praise the Lord. And it plays itself out in politics. So most of them are much more liberal, much more conscious, much more conscientious, and much more caring, than those of us who grew up in segregation and with watching the hate and the anti-busing and the lynchings, and it's just a different mindset. And you see it in social order.
But Dwight, to your point, we have a favorite restaurant here in Chicago, Pearl's Restaurant. It's a big soul food restaurant. It's an institution here, and the majority owner is many people think he's white, but he's actually biracial. He's half Japanese, but JR, James Riley, my mother, but he and I have been classmates since kindergarten. And so after going there for lunch one day, my mother came to me and she said, you know what? Because I started doing something there, but and all I needed to do was call him. He was like, Santita, please, honey, anything you want from me, pay for it. Your money's no good here. Just come. She said, it occurred to me that you actually have white friends that you grew up with. I mean, who are like your buddies. I mean, because I think he brought in a picture, Janice Mathis, of us when we had no teeth in the front from kindergarten and then first grade. He said, Mr. Jackson, I want to show you something. And it was, it's when we were children. And those are our first experiences, really, truly conscious experiences, are with each other. And that really does shape you in another way. It does. I mean, and that was 50 years ago. Now, moving forward, you've got Maxwell Frost, who said, you know what, if I win or lose, I can't lose because I'm going to represent a particular position. People are running for office and they're doing things in a different way, Attorney Mathis. And women are putting it on the line, too, because we're demanding to be heard in another way.
Absolutely correct. I think about Justin Jones, who was at the Rainbow Fish Convention.
Mm-hmm. Yes, from Tennessee.
Courageous. And his movement, a white woman was one of his partners in that movement to confront this in Tennessee General Assembly. That is a new way of thinking. I hadn't really thought about it that way, but that's encouraging, actually, because they are impatient. They are ready for change, and they're willing to do what it takes. I watched Maxwell Frost. He defeated a Republican incumbent congressman down in Florida.
And then,
nobody thought he had a snowball chance.
well, and he didn't mind saying, I was inspired by Bernie Sanders and Reverend Jesse Jackson. I mean, these are people I'm looking at. And, you're right.
Eloquent way that she expressed her position at the convention. These new voices will have their day. You asked me about what does it mean to have African nations, the BRIC nations in ascendancy. What it means is that the cultural arrogance of the United States is going to have to give way if we're going to make progress. That's what it means.
Where do you see women in that? And because I was at the Crans-Montana summit in Belgium just before we were locked away. It was in December of 2019. And I got a tremendous reception as I just laid out all that women have in common all over the world. And, just, I need a man for a bank account. I can't inherit land. The wealth gap, equal pay day. I just started laying out these facts, not just in the United States, but around the world. And it's almost as if the women were sponges. It's like, if we're going to be at a conference of women, we have to talk about that, those things, right?
I have to say there's no country on the face of the earth where women get treated fair. It has different permutations. It takes on different faces. It's property ownership. It's control of your body. It's access to education and wealth and commerce, but it's everywhere. And I think the role that women play in that and have played, one of the reasons I'm so admiring of the National Council of Negro Women and recommend it is because Mary McLeod Bethune in 1935 forced her way to the table at the United Nations Conference in San Francisco to be part of that discussion, that you will not send only Black men to represent the United States. And here we are almost 90 years later, and women can still be a powerful force for change on the global stage. And with the Red Card campaign that I mentioned earlier about building support for equal rights for women, not just in the United States, but around the globe, is now in more than 20 countries. We're in India, we're in Germany, we're in Brazil, of course, and all across the Caribbean and in the United States, building the case, moving toward 2030, that these sustainable development goals, particularly the one that relates to equality for women, needs to be spoken with a global, collective voice of women everywhere. That's what women can do. They can go to pledge.com and express their support by taking the pledge that we will not continue to stand for women being treated unequally. And what does that do? When women are treated better, the society improves. Everybody has more opportunity. Children are better cared for. I mean, the benefits are obvious, but they still require our voices and our work.
Dwight McKee, your thoughts?
I echo that. I think that that women are going to play a substantial role in the future as they are in the mode of their own self-discovery, and understand that who they are, the role they play in the society. Leon David, who used to be our political director, he said that women didn't need liberation, they needed education. They need to really understand how much power they really wield and wield it, So I think that Janice is very right in that. One thing I'd really like for everybody to be able to get a chance to read is Mary McLeod Bethune's letter to her people.
We couldn't hear you, Janice. Janice, I need you to.
Profound of a social mandate as you will ever find in the history of the world. She said on the point of death, she wrote a letter through, I guess it was Ebony magazine, Jet magazine.
Yes.
And it was a charge to her people. And it's just
brilliant and profound and provocative. And I think if anybody, man or woman, black or white, old or young, needs to read that and use that as a blueprint for how they should live their lives.
In the last couple of minutes before we go to break, Attorney Darrell Jones, we are in 2024. We're not moving into it. We're here. We're a few weeks away from the first Republican debate. Do you think the Democrats are going to have one? And what do you think? What do you think is going to happen if they don't? I mean, you've got different polls say that Robert Kennedy is at between 15 and 20+%. There's a tremendous amount of interest in him. Marianne Williamson's at 10%. I mean, can you afford not to have these people speak?
A question, Cynthia, because the structure of the Democratic Party is it wants to have itself believed to be the Big Tent. Well, if you want to be the Big Tent, then you got to let all the voices in. So, and if you're going to have all the voices in, you need to have the debate. We cannot, as the Democratic Party should not want to be in a position where it sounds like and appears that it's stifling people from being heard, from having different positions, from challenging positions that are there. So I think it's incredibly important that the party have the debate, that they allow Robert Kennedy Jr. to be on the stage and to bring the people that support him to hear what's being said, to test the thoughts. The same with Marianne Williamson, to test the thoughts, to put them out there, to test President Biden on the issues as well. All of those are extremely important. And I think that they don't do it. It's a major loss. It's a lost opportunity. It's a loss in the positioning of saying that you are the Big Tent, that you are inclusive, and that you want to have everybody involved in this process. That's the loss. That's the challenge. That's the danger in not having the debate if they choose to not have the debate, as it looks as though that's the road that they're on.
We want to get closing thoughts from this tremendous panel. Of course, please join the Transformative Justice Coalition. How can they reach out to you, Attorney Darrell Jones?
Absolutely. They can reach us at tjcoalition.org.
And if, Santiago, there are listeners that are between the ages of 18 and 35, we do a young millennial Gen Z training that's absolutely free. That's going to be during the Congressional Black Caucus weekend, September the 20th through the 24th. We encourage everyone to go to tjcoalition.org to get more information about that, Cynthia.
How can we join the National Council of Negro Women, Attorney Mathis?
It's simple. You go to
We got to get you in the mic. We can't hear you. Okay.
CNW.org and look for JOIN, JOIN. We're in 30 states, 300 chapters all over the country, more than 40,000 members, an additional 2 million women who are affiliated with NCNW. Join the movement.
All right, everybody. And Dwight, how can we get in touch with you?
You get in touch with the Alpha Project. What's that project? We teach it the Alpha Redemption Project.
That's
what it
MAAFAA Redemption Project. Yes, I got 30 seconds for you.
Yeah, I just want to commend everybody on your panel today. They're real activists. They really are making a major contribution to the dignity and the progress of world. So I just want to really commend them for their work and their consistency.
Well,
and they've been on the right in the middle of trying to bring clarity and direction.
Absolutely. And in the words of Dr. Mary McLeod Bethune, she said, I leave you love, love builds. I leave you hope. The Negro's growth will be great in the years to come. She had hope. I leave you the challenge of developing confidence in one another. I leave you a thirst for education. I leave you respect for the uses of power. Bless her heart. I leave you faith. I leave you racial dignity. I leave you a desire to live harmoniously with your fellow men. I leave you, finally, a responsibility to our young people. They are our future. Closing thoughts on Keep Hope Alive with Reverend Jesse Jackson. We hope that you'll join the Rainbow Push Coalition, rainbowpush.org, 773 Freedom throughout the week, Monday through Saturday. Please help push as push seeks to help you. back with closing thoughts on Keep Hope Alive. And I hope you'll join me on the Santita Jackson Show on the nation's largest progressive talk radio station, 6 to 8 a.m. Central Standard Time, Monday through Friday. WCPT 820 and AM 950 Radio, the voice of progressive Minnesota, and other stations. And of course, the Santita Jackson Show YouTube channel. Closing thoughts on Keep Hope Alive with Reverend Jesse Jackson.
We'll have closing thoughts from Reverend Jesse Jackson right here on Keep Hope Alive.
Wonderful. And we'll get closing thoughts from everybody here.
They're part of your
So
family.
you want to turn that down just a bit so they
Cooked
can
at high temperatures, which
my
is good.
corn chips. Dwight and Janice went on. Attorney Daryl Jones and Dwight, you all can speak with each other before we get closing thoughts from each of you before we go.
Where are you at this week, Daryl? This week, I'll be headed down to Milwaukee, Wisconsin, as well as over to Minneapolis, Minnesota.
Kenosha. Uh-huh.
No Kenosha. No Kenosha.
Oh my God. Really?
Boy, you don't stop, do you?
Well, you know, when they stop depressing the voters, I'll slow down.
But now let me ask you this. Do you travel with Bailey?
Yeah, sometimes Bailey does travel. He was there in Chicago at the conference.
Uh-huh.
And, he's been all over the place. He's a good traveling dog.
But I mean, how do you take care of him when you're on the road?
Well, usually, of course, we're at the dog-friendly hotel, and we'll, go for walks during the morning, walks in the afternoon, walks in the evening. He does well. He really does very well. And sometimes when we were down in Georgia, he would actually go to one of the dog daycare centers that was down there.
Oh, wow. Now, is that therapeutic for you to travel with Bailey?
Yeah, it is. One of the things that Bailey does is he's sort of an emotional support animal. So, if you're feeling, really tense and worked up because you've had a rough day, he'll come and he'll play with you and break you from that mood. Say, look, there's life to be lived. Right? You are loved. Let me lick on you. Let me play with you. Pull you out of whatever funk you might be in because I'm going to demand your attention. We're going to go for a walk, and you're just going to look at nature for a little while.
Huh. Okay. I like that. I'm allergic, but I'm feeling you. Dog dander. I didn't know it until I went away to college.
Oh, wow.
Oh, yeah. I mean, because we had a dog. But when I came home from college, when I would come home for the holidays, Miss Malone, who helped to take care of the home and she helped to take care of us, I would get sick. I get really sick when I came home. And she said, honey, have you thought, because she had known me since I was a child. She said, honey, have you thought you might be allergic to Snicker? And I couldn't fathom that because Snicker was our dog, It turns out I went back and got tested as soon as I got back to Howard. And dog dander, and horses can send me to the hospital. Oh, horses are the worst for me. And my father tried to make me into an equestrian at one point because he wanted me to find something that I liked that was outdoors. I was like, look, just give me a book. I'll sit under a tree. I'll do whatever you want. Oh, man.
Well, and Bailey is fortunate because, when he doesn't travel, I have family and friends that take care of him as well. So sometimes he gets to stay home.
Bless your heart. Because I was so touched when I saw you with Bailey. I said, isn't this precious? This is so sweet. Stand by. We're going to have, I think, about just under a minute for you and Dwight. So please tell people how they can get in touch with you, Daryl, and the Transformative Justice Coalition, but whatever parting thought you want. And when you hear my voice, that means I got to get out. Okay? So Dwight, and please let people know how they can reach you
15
as well.
seconds.
Very quickly, we're going to have under 2 minutes. So about 45 seconds apiece. I know that sounds strange, but here it is. 30.
3, 2, 1. You're live.
Hey, everybody, please reach out to us at Rainbow Push throughout the week at 773-FREEDOM or go to rainbowpush.org. Attorney Daryl Jones, closing thought.
Santita, we encourage everyone right now as we embark upon election season to, number one, go to vote.org and check on your voting status and see where it is. But number two, be certain to get involved in the political process. Begin now to talk to your neighbors, your friends, and everybody with regards to the issues that are occurring in your community and what's important. You know, support young voters. We encourage everyone to go to tjcoalition.org. You can find out everything that the Transformative Justice Coalition is involved in, as well as our Gen Z and young millennial training that we have that's coming up. And if you want to reach me, you can certainly reach me at djones@tjcoalition.org. But we encourage you to go to tjcoalition.org and get involved in this election cycle.
Get involved and reach out and have them come into your city, including Kenosha, Wisconsin. Private joke. Dwight McKee, the last 30 seconds belong to you.
You know, Mary Bethune, that was a tremendous charge that you just read. Just tremendous charge. That was after she built a college. That was after she started the largest black women's association in the world. That was after she crashed through there. She lived the life that she charged us to live. And so we have to use those kind of ancestors as examples and our model for what our lives should look like.
Absolutely.
And we're out.
And that's it.
Keep hope alive with
Oh,
Reverend
honey,
Jesse
I'm sorry,
Jackson.
but
For more
keep
information
talking
on
to
upcoming shows and guests,
the people
please
who are
visit our
gathered
website
here,
at
Dwight. They are numerous.
www.keephopealiveradio.com.
Dwight, please finish your statement for everybody here. They're listening.
Well, I was just simply saying, when we talk to people, we all on it now. Live the life that as a king used to say. The king used to say, that's the life that you sing about.
Well, you know, and notice she didn't speak about any money. It was about faith and values, everybody. And I think, what'd you say, after she built the school?
After she built a school, she built an organization, after she crashed the UN.
With no money, but with faith and mission. So, you know, it's just, you know, thank you for that. I mean, because that's really it. Because, you know, I was talking to a friend of mine who I hadn't seen in many, many, many years. And he was saying, you know, would you come to Washington? You know, I want to take you out here, 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 and here. And I said, okay, that would be great. I said, well, you know, I don't do bars, but a lovely restaurant I will do. And she said, oh, yeah, it would be great. It'll be great. But what I love about these new restaurants, these are young Black entrepreneurs and they're doing it right. You know, linen tablecloths, da. And I was like, that is great. I said, but you know, Miss Sylvia Woods up in Harlem, she had a little cafe, right? And she ended up owning the block in Harlem, which now is among the most valuable real estate in all of the country. You know, that's doing it right too. And I think that, you know, I think we put a lot, I think our values, I mean, and I'm all about, you know, I love fabulous, lovely things, but to me, fabulous and lovely and learned is my great grandmother who could neither read nor write. And there's something that she has dropped into me that I think about, Dwight, and you knew my great grandmother, Tibby. I think about her every single day. Every single day. And legally, when you pay me, you pay her. This woman, on the day that I was born, Daryl, she couldn't read or write, but you know what she did? She went and got an insurance policy. And the insurance company just reached out to me. And they said, you never cashed it in. Wow. When I went home, I just wept. I said, because to show you how good God was, I had full scholarships to wherever I wanted to go, you know, which was Howard and Spelman. And so I didn't need it, didn't even need to think about it, but she never stopped paying on it. She said, I can't read and write, but you will. And I hope we never lose. Oh my goodness. And I hope we don't lose that. You don't need corporate sponsorship to do what we need to do. As a matter of fact, what did Reverend Jackson say? You can't ride to freedom. What, Dwight, on freedom, on Pharaoh's chariot? That is not the way this thing is going to work. Isn't that what he used to say, Dwight?
That's what he used to say.
What did that mean to you?
You have to, Elijah used to call it self-sufficient. We have to, he used to say, Jackson, nobody can save us but us. Is that we can't be dependent on somebody, on our slave masters to free. It don't make sense.
Black folks freed themselves. That's the dirty little secret about slavery, y'all. At one point, even Martha Washington, George Washington's wife, said, why are you willing these enslaved people to me? I don't want them. They hate us. I free them. That's what she told her husband. That's what she said. Oh, please. Black people freed themselves. We freed ourselves. We did do that. So it's just something for us to think about. And when you think about this last will and testament from this great, great, great woman, she didn't mention money not one time. Not one time. Please do not predicate your value on a dollar, which is losing value. What did you say about the dollar? And every time you say it, Dwight, people go crazy. You said, wait a minute. Hold on. This dollar, the value is fleeting. Haven't you said that?
It's dollar is a social construct. There's no inherent value put on it. It makes it work. It's a green piece of paper with it. And it's your value system that gives it value.
That's right. And more, you're seeing those people who have been colonized. They're saying you don't have the same value. And in fact, I'm going to print my own dollar. The Caribbean increasingly are saying, Queen Elizabeth and King Charles, get up off of my dollar, my currency. It just, people have changed. What did Reverend also used to say? Land's changing hands, and that's and that really is nation time. So
my own dollar.
Does anyone have Daryl, Dwight? Do you want to say anything before we go?
Assalamu alaikum.
Okay. Oh, you know what? God bless him and God bless you. Sending you and Bailey so much love today, Daryl. Sending you love, Dwight. God bless you. Thank you, Jeremy.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you. Have a great week.
God bless you. I'll speak with you soon. It'll be before the week is out, of course.
Absolutely.
All right. Have a good one.
All right. Take care, Dwight. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Love you all.